全然平気。みんな元気そうで嬉しいよ。
Hey everyone, it's Mark. This is my recap for Pokémon Journeys episode 68, Rivals for Go, The Path to Mew. This was the 1153rd episode of the Pokemon anime, and this was probably the most anticipated episode for a long time. We got to see Ash's old Pokemon, Gary returned, and there was a raid battle against Moltres. I've seen a lot of divisive opinions about this episode, and there's obviously so much to break down, so let's just get straight into it. We don't waste any time getting into the action this episode. Ash and Go are already at Professor Oak's lab, and apparently the backstory here is that Professor Cerise sent them to drop off some materials for Professor Oak. We get the first of many instances of continuity throughout this episode when Go brings up the time when he attended a Pokemon camp at Oak's lab when he was 6, which was a callback to the first episode of Journeys. They actually connected the dots here and figured out that it was probably Ash who overslept that day and caused the camp to start late, which is pretty crazy to think about how Go, Chloe, and Ash all could have been there that day, especially considering that was the day when Go first saw Mew. Professor Oak asked to see Go's Pokedex, and when I was watching this part, I was like, oh, Oak is so gonna freak out when he sees Suicune or Eternatus in there. And sure enough, he is very surprised to see that Go has indeed caught a legendary Pokemon. He uses this as a segue to introduce Project Mew, and this is the backstory we've been waiting for ever since Project Mew was first announced. So basically, Project Mew is a group of people that are coming together in order to search for Mew, but you need to pass trial missions in order to get accepted into Project Mew. Go declines the offer to join Project Mew, which was quite the shock to me. I thought Go's initial attitude towards Project Mew was very strange, and in fact, I thought Go acted a lot in this episode kind of like he did back in episode 37 when he was all awkward around Ash's Alola friends. Anyways, I'll talk more about that later on, but for now, Professor Oak mentions how Ash's Pokemon are waiting to see him, so Ash runs off to meet them. All of this so far has taken place before the opening theme is even played. They were not messing around with the important content this week. This episode was filled with so much stuff. Let's keep going. We get to see Ash reunite with his old Pokemon, well, a lot of his old Pokemon, but not all of them. This was the first time any of Ash's Unova or Kalos Pokemon have been seen at Oak's Lab since the end of each of their series, and funny enough, this was the only time Ash's Charizard has returned without burning Ash with its flamethrower. Not all of Ash's Pokemon were here, which didn't surprise me too much. I mean, I guess it is strange how they decide which Pokemon will show up and which don't, but I don't know, I didn't really mind that not all of his Pokemon were here. We didn't spend much time with any of them anyways. Professor Oak says that Infernape has been missing for a few days, which triggers the first Diamond and Pearl flashback of the episode, although it was basically just showing Ash in his old Sinnoh outfit. Huge smile on my face when I saw a Tracy shout out. I thought he'd been wiped off the face of the planet. It had been so long since he'd been seen or mentioned. Before Infernape disappeared, it had been challenging all of Ash's Fire-type Pokemon to battles, although for some reason Torkoal was just left out of this entire episode. This was really the only strange submission of Ash's old Pokemon in my opinion. Like, they went out of their way to highlight all of Ash's Fire types except for Torkoal. Well, I guess for once Torkoal's tears are totally understandable. I'd be crying too if I got excluded like that. So Ash and Go leave to search for Infernape, and I don't know if they were off Oak's property yet, but Go was trying to catch some Pokemon when they get cornered by an Onix when suddenly, out of nowhere, a Hydro Pump comes in to save the day, and who else but Gary Mother Effin' Oak makes his appearance. The background music at this point in the episode was actually an updated version of the song I'm playing as background music right now. That was a nice touch to use that music as Ash and Gary reminisce about their rivalry. That's old news though, and Ash and Gary are friends now. But Gary hasn't lost that antagonistic part of him yet, and he starts needling Go by making fun of him for not being up to par to be Ash's new companion. To be fair to Go here, I think he was fully in the right to be annoyed by Gary this episode. This guy he just met was being pretty mean to him all of a sudden for basically no reason. By the end of the episode, we'll see that there was actually a reason for all this, but for now, Gary is just being Gary, and if he can't pick on Ash anymore, then he's going to have to annoy someone. Second Diamond and Pearl flashback of the episode, and this one was really cool. When Ash says they're searching for Infernape, Gary recalls watching Ash and Paul's battle at the Sinnoh League, which makes sense since presumably that battle was on TV all across the Sinnoh region at the time. Gary actually mentioned earlier that he was only in Sinnoh for a certain period of time and he'd since started traveling all over the world to search for Pokemon, but man, I can't get over how cool this flashback art was in this shot. Also, it was cool to see Paul for the first time since Diamond and Pearl, albeit only in a flashback. Probably the biggest cliffhanger in this entire episode for me was Ash and Gary walking away in this scene and catching up on what happened after they last saw each other in Sinnoh. They both kind of laugh it off as being too much to recap all at once, but we go to commercials before they can really talk about anything. Now that's a conversation I would have liked to hear more of. We get a mini montage of the three of them traveling to this valley where Gary thinks Infernape might be. Oh yeah, Gary's also looking for Moltres at this place too, but you guys knew that already. When they arrive at the valley, Gary explains why Moltres would come here, and he was also correct in saying that Infernape would be here as well. Apparently, it had sensed Moltres would be showing up here and wanted to come battle it. Moltres does show up, of course, and the battle gets off to a pretty epic start. I mean, Infernape and Moltres were basically battling one-on-one, and Infernape runs through its entire moveset, which hasn't changed at all since Diamond and Pearl, but eventually its Flare Blitz gets countered, and Infernape has taken a lot of damage very quickly. Not enough damage to activate Blaze, though, so how hurt really was Infernape? Enough for Ash to be concerned at least, but Infernape still looked totally fine to battle, but it didn't for the rest of the episode. What? This was honestly the biggest letdown of the whole episode for me. That was it for Ash's Infernape? I'll revisit this in the discussion section, there's still tons more action to recap right now. Gary takes over battling at this point, and Blastoise actually manages to land some significant damage with a Water Pulse attack before we get to see the epic shot of Moltres using Burn Up that was used to promote this episode. They really made this seem like it was going to be some huge climactic and devastating attack, but everyone was totally fine after it. Again, what? This made no sense how everyone just shook that off like it was nothing. That looked incredibly powerful, but I guess not. Anyways, Blastoise gets caught in a hurricane attack, and this was enough to knock it out, so Go springs into action next, and hold on, I thought this clip of Go throwing a Pokeball was actually going to be him trying to catch Moltres. They were really slick in the editing of that special preview trailer a while back. This did not look like Go just sending out a Pokemon back then. Go's attempt at battling Moltres goes pretty poorly. Ash and Gary have to send out their electric types just to save Go's Cinderace, and here we go. Finally, we're starting to take this battle seriously. They both land a massive hit on Moltres, and why weren't they just battling like this from the start? So now the battle is really heating up, and what happens next was even more epic. Oh wait, no it wasn't, because Moltres just flew away and left. Wow, what an anticlimactic way to end that battle. No Blaze Infernape, no real raid battle strategy or combination attacks. I don't know, I definitely got my expectations way too high for this battle. No one even tried to catch Moltres either. Gary never even wanted to catch Moltres, all he wanted was a feather. Everyone heads back to Oak's lab to end the episode, and Infernape is talking to the other fire types about how cool battling Moltres was. Of course, Torkoal is just replaced by Bulbasaur for literally no reason at all. We learn that Gary is actually taking part in Project Mew, and that he needed to collect a Moltres feather as part of one of his trial missions in order to get accepted, and I think this character's name is Asahi. We saw her introduced in the preview trailer a while back, but she wasn't even referred to by name in this bit. Ultimately, even though I had some small issues with this episode up to this point, I thought the ending was basically perfect. Ash and Go start asking about Gary's involvement in Project Mew, and he starts provoking Go again by saying that he's not a good enough trainer to take part in Project Mew. Gary says his goodbyes, including a firm handshake with Ash. It's still so weird to me seeing these two be so friendly to one another. Gary explains that his goal is to research everything about Pokemon, which includes Mew, since it holds the genes of all Pokemon. Go was taken aback by this. I mean, Gary basically just stated Go's dream right there. Go isn't going to take that lying down, and he reverses course from earlier in the episode and accepts the offer to join Project Mew. And with that, the episode ends with Gary Oak, of all people, being established as Go's new rival. Kicking off the discussion section with a bingo update, I'm guessing we'll have some new viewers to this video who may not be familiar, so this is the Elite Trainer Mark bingo card. Basically, it's a little game that I came up with the help of my Discord server, which you can join using the link in the description, and we're trying to see if we can get bingo before Pokemon Journeys is over. In this episode, we checked off the third tile of the bingo card, Ash battling with his old Pokemon. Although Infernape didn't do too much in the battle against Moltres, it does count, so now we've got 2 down in the same row. One of the bingo spaces is me giving an episode a 10 out of 10 rating, and the wait continues for that one because I'm giving this episode a 9 out of 10 rating. It's more like an 8.5 to be honest, but let's call it a 9 out of 10 for the sake of being positive. So I will say I came into this episode with huge expectations. Like, I thought this episode had the opportunity to blow me away and be a contender for being the best Journeys episode yet. The episode did not meet those expectations, and I'm guessing plenty of you were let down by this episode as well, at least to some extent. The things that I would mark this episode down for basically all have to do with the battle against Moltres. They really hyped this up in the promotion for this episode, and I thought we'd get to see the trio of Ash, Go, and Gary really take it to this legendary bird in a raid battle, but instead, in reality, it was pretty underwhelming. If you're as big of an Infernape fan as I am, then wow, was it a letdown to just see it use 4 moves, land basically no damage, and then just give up on battling. I mean, Ash even recognized that it wanted to keep battling, but then it didn't. It just stood there for the rest of the battle. I can only imagine there was more Infernape action in this battle originally, but then maybe they just had to cut some of it to fit everything into one episode, so they figured Infernape was fine just by having its initial flurry of attacks. That was really disappointing in my opinion. But again, I definitely had way too high of expectations for what Infernape would do in this battle. This was never going to be anything near as good as its battle with Paul's Electivire. The rest of the battle was fine, I guess. I already talked about how dumb it was that Moltres' burn up did next to nothing, and then what an epic way to end the battle by just flying away. I suppose I'm probably in the minority here in that I actually wanted Go to catch Moltres here. I mean, imagine how the fanbase would have reacted to that. Anyways, enough about the battle. Let's talk about the rest of the episode. I liked the pacing at the beginning. We got straight into the action and really accomplished a lot, even in just the first scene before the opening theme even played. Ash's reunion with all of his old Pokemon was exactly what I expected it to be, so no complaints from me there, other than the fact that Corphish was the only Hoenn representation, which just made no sense considering how Torkoal really should have been included with the rest of Ash's fire types. I thought Gary's return was done pretty much perfectly in this episode. It's definitely a running theme that Go doesn't get along too well with any of Ash's former friends, or rivals in Gary's case. My favorite part about Gary is his mean personality. He's the kind of character that you just love to hate, so I'm glad he's back in a rival role, and it's really cool to see him become Go's rival. Gary being a part of Project Mew is awesome. I can't wait to see how that story unfolds and how Go will ultimately overcome his new rival. Speaking of which, let's talk about why I really like this episode. We can throw out the other stuff that I've talked about so far. I thought coming into this episode that the action against Moltres would be the highlight, but really it wasn't. For me, the highlight of this episode was just how hyped it got me to see Project Mew play out. I didn't really understand why Go was hesitant to join at the start. I guess we can just chalk that up to social anxiety or something like that. Don't worry, Go. All of us introverts can relate to you at that level. But Gary's involvement in this episode was really an amazing way to build up my anticipation for Project Mew. Before Go can even join this task force and search for Mew, he has to complete trial missions, and if they are anything as difficult as collecting the feather of a legendary Pokemon, I can't even imagine what cool trials will await Ash and Go in the future. Along with the Project Mew hype, I thought this episode really nailed the small bits of continuity, such as Go having Suicune in his Pokedex, Ash realizing that he overslept and missed the Pokemon camp that Go attended, the original series flashbacks, and the Diamond and Pearl callbacks. How cool was that to hear that Gary actually watched Ash's battle against Paul at the Sinnoh League? So that's really why I enjoyed this episode so much. I went into it expecting to be blown away by the battle with Moltres, Infernape's return, and maybe even someone catching Moltres. Instead, what actually made this episode really cool in my opinion was just how effectively it built up Project Mew. I am beyond excited to see how the rest of that storyline plays out, and I just can't wait for it to get started. All that excitement I had for Project Mew instantly went away when I saw the preview for next week. From everything that happened in this episode and the hype for Project Mew to Grookey and Eevee running an errand, I could barely even pay attention to this preview. I was too busy shaking my head and laughing how this is the follow-up to the episode we just saw. I mean, sure, it'll be cute filler, and it's always good to see Chloe get some screen time, but it's just not what I want to see next week. That's all I've got for this video. Thanks so much for watching, and let me know what your guys' thoughts are down in the comments. Be sure to like this video and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys next time.